Hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today as part of AusPlat 2021. My colleagues from University of Southern Queensland who participated in this project are Tanya Machin, Nancy Hall and Carla Jeffries. Hopefully some of them are online listening right now. I'd like to outline a project which is soon to be completed called the Australian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science. And I'd also like to consider something which is, I think, a very relevant question for people who are studying psychology. And that is, what can you do with a psychology degree? Now, this is an old question. It has been asked many times and is actually somewhat tricky to unpack. So part of what I'm going to do today is to explain the rationale for the Australian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science and put it in the context of understanding how important it is for helping students who are studying psychology. There are very compelling reasons to consider what is possible and what you might do with a psychology degree. So students want to be able to achieve their career goals and have a satisfying career. But it isn't always the case that as students, we know what we would enjoy and be good at from the very beginning. So enrolling in a degree can be sometimes a voyage of discovery, not just a decision that's made to achieve a particular employment type of outcome. Some of the other things that are going on in our area, in our professional area in Australia, include quite a major change to the psychology training pathways. From the middle of 2022, the supervised practice pathway, which has always been known as the 4+2 pathway, will cease to allow students to enter that pathway, and at some point in the future, in 5 or 6, 7 years time, it will close entirely. But from the middle of 2022, students who wish to study postgraduate psychology, I should say that students who wish to become psychologists will need to study a postgraduate psychology degree, either a 5th year, combined 5th and 6th year in Australia. So this has really brought about, I think, quite a turning point or a crossroads, fork in the road perhaps even in the psychology profession in Australia. There are some key takeaway messages from this talk today, and really the key one is that if students think about and focus on enhancing their levels of psychological literacy, this is actually a key to improving their career options. So that's something that I'll mention during the presentation as well. There are some other key issues that relate to the work readiness of psychology graduates, and this is an important issue that needs to be carefully researched and which we haven't probably done enough on. People often assume that the degree title or the major of your degree should directly translate into a specific job title or field, and that's actually not correct. We know that the number of undergraduate students in a psychology major vastly exceeds the number of students who are able to enroll in postgraduate psychology programs. So I've got two bits of data. The 2019 Graduate Outcome Survey indicated around 9,424 graduates from psychology undergraduate degrees, which is about 3.1% of the total number of graduates in Australia that were tracked, about 300,000. And psychology was one of the study areas with the lowest rate of full-time employment in 2019, around 63.4%, but a very high, I think, proportion of undergraduates proceeding to full-time study, around 35%. Now, in 2020, the same survey showed that the actual percentage of graduates of psychology degrees in full-time employment was even lower, but that the percentage proceeding to full-time study was lower as well. Now, we probably are expecting that the students who are proceeding to full-time study are doing honours degrees or the equivalent 4th year programs that will take them through then to a postgraduate psychology degree or the supervised practice pathway, at least at this point. The last time we actually had some good data about progression through to postgraduate studies, we found, this is Crowe et al. 2012, found that the number of students who do progress to postgraduate studies in psychology was perhaps only about 8% of the psychology undergraduate cohorts. So we don't have really any data on exactly where undergraduate students go, and of course they could actually go into relevant disciplines like education, business, HR, or do other things altogether. So what we've decided to do is to think about how to improve employability for our psychology students who are studying undergraduate psychology degrees. We probably need to think about what that means, what employability is, and there are a few important points I want to make here. We need to also not just assume that employability in the future will be the same, that the workforce of the future is one that will require employability skills, cultural and ethical perspectives, self-management skills, and other important things. And this is the nature of work. It's changing, of course. But we also need a more contextualized and nuanced approach to employability. It's not one thing. It's relevant. It probably is different things for different types of occupations and different modes of employment, different life and career stages and different cultural contexts. So understanding employability for psychology graduates is a major challenge for us. Ashley Swainsberg et al. And others argued for a clearer understanding also of the discipline-specific attributes of psychology graduates, which I really endorse. So a better way of thinking perhaps about these discipline-specific attributes is also to consider the work that's being done on student psychological literacy. And there's a number of other very interesting and relevant presentations at AusPlat 2021 on this topic that I'm going to refer you to. So what we've committed to do at USQ is adapt the Canadian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science, and that will be called, no surprises, the Australian Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science. This handbook will support our undergraduate psychology students developing a broader view of the ways that psychological science can be applied, and also introduce some really important concepts like psychological literacy, for example. So the quote I've provided there is, throughout this book you will learn more about career search strategies, career opportunities related to psychology, and just some of the many ways that psychological science has been applied to opportunities and challenges facing our society. The outcome of this process should also then be reflected in students linking the content and learning outcomes from their degree courses and programs to the employable skills that are sought after in Australian workplaces. And once those connections are made, I think that is one of the factors that can enhance students' ability to construct appropriate careers. We'll talk a little bit about the goals and structure of the handbook, and I'll give you a small example then of some of the things that we've already developed, and then that will conclude the presentation. So the goals of the handbook are really amazing. It's a handbook that serves to be very inclusive, to define psychological science and outline the value of psychological science in a range of important areas, not just in being practicing psychologists. We also want to explain the importance of psychological literacy, and that this is a concept that can assist students and psychology educators to get to really get a grasp and capture the impact of what is being learned in a psychology degree. So it's very much then about the application of psychological knowledge and expertise to a range of important situations and life domains. We encourage and provide a way of assessing employable skills confidence, and we're very keen for students to be able to track their employability skills confidence, or self-efficacy is the term we use in the book, over time, so that they have a sense of how that's developing while they're in an undergraduate program. There's a very strong emphasis on effective career decision making, so that students have the right tools in their career decision making toolkit to make the best possible career choices and plans. There's a very strong emphasis on developing a professional identity, which is why consistently we talk about psychological science and becoming a psychological scientist. And then there are other ways that we've developed to assess the impact and evaluate the impact of career resources on students' work readiness and career outcome. So it's very important that we actually get information and data on what helps students to develop these positive and diverse career options, and how that impacts ultimately on their careers. So the structure of the handbook will include 15 chapters with 5 currently completed. The first, they're not in the order in which they exist in the Canadian handbook, but we have an introduction to careers in psychological science, which is myself and Natalie Gasson. Introduction to career development, which is Nancy Hoare and Jennifer Luke. Research methods in the psychological sciences, edited, Australianised by myself and Eric Fine. Psychology and Law in Australia by Alfred and Maria Allen. And Psychology in the Military, developed by Jerry Fogarty and some colleagues in the military. Peter Murphy's one, but I'm just missing the name of the other one. There's also resources in chapters such as case studies and career conversations, and I'm going to show you a bit of an example of what a case study will look like in chapter 2 on career decision making. So the case study is around Diana, a 43-year-old who graduated with a Bachelor of Science, majoring in psychology approximately 10 years ago. Diana has worked in community services as a project officer and now wants to continue her psychology studies to become a clinical psychologist. So let's listen to a little bit about what 2 experienced career development practitioners have to say on this topic.
Hello and welcome to our case study series for Chapter 2, an introduction to careers in the psychological sciences. My name is Dr. Nancy Hoare. I'm a registered psychologist and a senior lecturer in the School of Counselling and Psychology at the University of Southern Queensland. We are going to present some scenarios that represent typical career questions that prospective or current students may have about studying psychology. My colleague is Dr. Jennifer Luke, who is a career development practitioner with USQ's Careers and Employability Service, and Jennifer's also a researcher at USQ.
Hello Nancy and hello everybody.
Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. The people in the case studies are fictitious and all the names are pseudonyms, but the issues presented are drawn from real issues that have been presented by people who have sought careers counselling. So this case study is focusing on Diana, who is a 43-year-old who graduated with a Bachelor of Science Psychology 10 years ago. Jennifer, let's now have a chat about Diana, because since Diana graduated with her degree 10 years ago, she's worked in community services as a project officer. She's now married with 2 primary school-aged children, and she's wanting to return to her psychology studies and build on a career path towards becoming a clinical psychologist. She's got an understanding that there are several years of study to complete, but Diana is unsure if she is still eligible to enter a psychology honours program, which, on completion, will provide her with the pathway into a Master of Clinical Psychology. So, Jennifer, career development-wise, how can we assist Diana?
You get the idea. It's a very interesting little case study, and several of those in Chapter 2. This slide just summarises some of the important ideas that have been talked about in this presentation, and essentially the Handbook for Careers in Psychological Science is very much about becoming the best psychological science in your own practice, your teaching, supervision, through leading, facilitation, program design, program evaluation, managing teams, supporting volunteers, crafting interventions, analysing all types of data, and assisting even our elected leaders. So it's a very strong emphasis on how psychological science is the fundamental heart and strength of the practice of in many areas, including professional psychological practice. We have major challenges facing us in Australia, and we do need this very strong discipline base. So psychology graduates with expertise in areas that employers greatly value will also then be valued by society. The final slide is simply a link to the presentation, the tinyurl.com/Machin-AP, and an email address if you want to contact me, tony.machin@usq.edu.au. Thank you very much.